Hello and welcome. I'm your host, Lloyd Burrell from the website electricsense.com. My mission is finding and sharing solutions and raising awareness so that we can all live a healthy life in our electromagnetic world. Today, I'm thrilled to have as my guests Emma Jones and Steve Phillips from the School of Naturopathic Nutrition. Emma Jones is a former teacher who had a career change into naturopathy after being diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and electrical hypersensitivity in 1994. Emma runs the School of Naturopathic Nutrition with her husband, Steve Phillips. Steve, a former semi-professional rugby player, is a qualified naturopath, coach, and also writes on various subjects related to mental and spiritual wellness. What Emma and Steve have in common is that they have both lived through the trials and tribulations of electrical hypersensitivity, and they're both now fully recovered, which is the main reason I wanted to talk to them today. So we're going to be talking about their recovery from this thing we call electrical hypersensitivity, and we're going to be talking about their 7-stage approach to dealing with this condition. Emma and Steve are based in Cardiff in the UK, and you can contact them through the website lovenaturopathy.co.uk. That's all one word, lovenaturopathy.co.uk. Emma, Steve, welcome to the program.
Hi there.
Hi Lloyd, great to be on the show.
Great to have you on. Great to have you on. It's always really nice to talk to fellow Brits. I love talking to Americans too, but obviously I get a lot of Americans on, and so it's nice to talk to fellow Brits. So there's more to what you do than just electrical sensitivity, but yeah, that's what we're talking about today. And I know you've had some success in helping other people overcome their symptoms. So I want to talk about your approach. But before we do that, I want to talk about you, so we can understand who you are, where you're coming from. So if I can first ask you, Emma. So back in the, as I understand it, back in the early 1990s, you were a teacher, and then you started having these health issues. Can you tell us how that started, with you, with the EMF and the electrical sensitivity and naturopathy?
As you said, I trained as a teacher. I started to feel very low in energy and symptoms which were really occurring, such as adrenal burnout. And it really stopped me in my tracks in terms of my career. And what I started to notice was, even being in the room with a television or using a hands-free phone was really affecting my brain and also my clarity. So some of the symptoms I was getting at the time was headaches, confusion, a racing of the heart, anxiety. And it started to make the links really, as well as having Emmy with this hypersensitivity to electricity and that type of equipment. And so it started to become really severe, where there was fainting, and to the point where I had to actually remove myself from the situations and live quite simply for a while. At that point in time, I was lucky enough to have been recommended Barbara Wren, who's a leading naturopath, and paid a visit to her, and she set me on the path of getting well from this, and it inspired me so much really that I decided to train with her and learn her methods. And so I spent a number of years working with Barbara, 7 years in total. And from the sort of electrical sensitivity, I actually recovered within 6 months of working with her. So I was fully recovered and fully functioning. So I decided to study with her and then go on to work with Barbara for many years. And so what was interesting after about 10 years of recovery was that I went through a phase where I was flying a lot back and forth islands when I was working for the college, and also I'd been using a mobile phone for a while at that point. And I started to notice actually that the symptoms were coming back actually, and I wondered actually, am I going back into ME? But I started to piece it together at that point in time in 2004 and noticed that actually it was just the EMF overload again. And when I was speaking to Barbara at the time and sort of working it out to myself, I kind of pieced it together in terms of noticing really, because of my own history with a tendency to adrenal fatigue. The adrenal fatigue and the thyroid insufficiency had kicked in at that point again and had actually set off the EMF sensitivity. So I really did quite a bit of work at the time around those two areas of the body, the adrenals and the thyroid. And since then, 2004, I've been absolutely fine, completely free of symptoms. But I do meet these symptoms in many clients these days. So
yes,
it's something I feel really passionate about in terms of helping people and helping people do it in a step-by-step way that doesn't feel overwhelming, because there's so much information out there, isn't there?
There is.
And it's such a debilitating thing, really.
It is, yeah, and it's there is information out there, and at the same time, there seems to be a lack of any sort of clear way of dealing with it, and there are different ways of dealing with it, and it does seem to, it manifests differently in different people, and because you're talking about adrenal fatigue and thyroid, and we're going to go into that and get clear on it and what exactly that means. And I'm glad you mentioned Barbara Wren, who's I'm a big fan of Barbara Wren. I read both her books, and I had her as a guest here a few years ago, and she influenced me a lot too. I really love her approach. So but I'd like to ask you, Steve. Because everybody's different. Everybody experiences this thing we call electrical sensitivity, and I use this term. You can't see me here, but I'm putting inverted commas around it because I don't like sort of pigeonholing it, but it's handy. It's a handy term to use to talk about this thing. What happens, when we're around EMFs, although it's not just about EMFs. But so your story, Steve. What happened with you? How did you realize, and what were your symptoms?
Yeah, so the first time I felt it was when I was in London. And I was outside my flat in London, just about to jump in my car, put the sat-nav on, and all of a sudden I just started having this like a throbbing inside my head, like a magnetic feeling almost around my head. I was thinking, what the heck is that? I was looking around and thinking, what? Out of interest, I just switched the sat-nav off. I switched it off, the feeling went away. I was thinking, that's strange. I put the sat-nav back on, the feeling came back again. That was my first experience of it. And I was thinking, that's strange, because I never even thought about or contemplated about those things before, of them being the damage to our health. And anyway, I just got on with stuff. I just remember realising that, but I got on with it and carried on. Anyway, at that point, my health started deteriorating when I was in London. I had to actually leave London and come and take some respite at my mum's. And I believe that was my first insight into electrohypersensitivity, although I didn't know what it was at the time, because it was back maybe 10 years ago. So it wasn't talked about, and I spoke to doctors and stuff about my symptoms. Anyway, I came back, I healed in my mum's, took some time out from London, where obviously there's loads of that there, and healed and forgot about it. I didn't even think that it was electrohypersensitivity. Then years later, I joined the Hare Krishna temple as a monk. I was living there for a couple of years, and it was glorious. It was amazing. However, there was, we were up early in the morning, and there was a lot of service, till later on in the night, and I ended up burning myself out basically. Towards the
as
end
a monk, you burned yourself out as a monk.
Yeah.
First time I've heard that one.
Because there's a lot of service involved, and so you're up early in the morning, and I wanted to do my best, for the cause kind of thing, and so I was going out, and of course a lot of the work is in city centres, outside often high streets where there's mobile phone shops, and of course lots of masts. So I started making the connection. Every time I was in a city centre, I started feeling nauseous, dizzy, and I felt like a fight or flight response. I just wanted to get out of the place. Likewise, if there was Wi-Fi or anything in the building, if I walked into that building, I would feel it immediately. If I was in a car, I could feel a mobile phone that was being switched on. Someone speaking on their phone used to cause a lot of pain for me. And others around me thought I was, they thought I lost the plot, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And, and I was saying, look, I am really feeling this stuff. And I was scientifically proving it in my own way, because when they were switching their phones on, if they had Wi-Fi on or Bluetooth on, I was able to tell them what was on their phones, because I could tell the difference between the frequencies even sometimes,
Really?
So it was, anyway, it got quite bad, and I was using loads of gadgets and stuff at that time, but it got to the point where I had to move out of the temple because my health was so bad. And fortunately, Emma's just making me aware. It's really interesting that when I was living in the temple as well, I was living very close to this huge mast. And interestingly enough, me and Emma were comparing notes before we spoke here today. And we both lived on the same street, believe it or not, at different times. And that was the time when we both manifested the electrohypersensitivity. And likewise, when we both moved away from there, it started to heal. I don't believe that was the sole thing, but it definitely was an influencing factor. And so cut a long story short, when I left the temple, there was somebody that I'd met while I was living in the temple, and she was already a student of Emma's, and she was saying, you need to go and see Emma. And she told me 3 times, and on the 3rd time I took note, I took heed, and I went to see Emma with my mum. And it was amazing to meet her, because I'd met somebody then that already experienced, and at that point, it's getting a little bit more popular now, and people like yourself, Lloyd, are making it much more popular, and it's been a great help having your resources there from the website, read your book, etc. But at that point, there wasn't much out there. So it was really nice to speak to Emma. I spoke to Emma, and then we started the whole naturopathic nutrition approach. And like Emma said, within 3-6 months, started to feel better, and then full recovery then about 2 years, I'd say. But it was gradually every month it was getting better and better, and it was just it was so relieving, because I thought I was going to have to go and live on a commune somewhere in France, or and that was my story.
That's quite a story. Rugby playing monk turns into naturopath, falls in love with his, because that's where you met, you guys. Yeah,
I missed that part, Lloyd. Yeah,
kind of important. It's quite a story. And so while we're on this topic then, because we're going to talk about your approach, this 7-step approach that you have to healing, but let's just dive into that a sec first, into this, what are the causes? Because you're saying, you mentioned you lived on the same street, but in my book, the EMFs are more like a trigger than necessarily a cause. So it's there are multiple causes. I think we're agreed on that. But so if I can ask you that, what in the work that you're doing, in your experience, your personal experience, and in the work that you're doing, there's people that you're seeing, what are the causes of this thing we call electrical hypersensitivity?
Yeah, there are lots of links really with people who get these symptoms, and one of the first things that happens is the body goes into a high level of toxicity. So that could be stress, poor eating, but also severe dehydration. And when we actually start to hydrate the body, the histamine levels start to lower, which makes us less reactive then to internal foods that may be aggravating us, and also externally the environment. So the 7 stages of treatment that we teach, the first phases of that is to hydrate properly and to actually change the pH of the body with a change in diet, starting to detoxify and therefore reduce the toxic overload. And I think that in itself can reduce symptoms quite significantly. Part of that also can be that the body has had long-term deficiencies, which has weakened the nervous system and the endocrine system over time. So I think, going back to when I was heading for the problem in 94, there was already quite big deficiencies there in the history, based on my own family history and based on my health up until that point. So there was a weakness there in the adrenals and in the thyroid in my case. And I think the thyroid is a big part of supporting the treatment, because the thyroid actually deals with radiation, and it's the iodine which the thyroid uses in order to actually detoxify radiation from the body.
Right.
So often when the thyroid energy becomes slightly underactive, and that really starts when the adrenal glands have been overused. So there's maybe overuse of the adrenal glands, lots of stress, maybe too much caffeine, stimulants and that sort of thing. The energy goes down in those two endocrine glands, and then the body is actually not processing and clearing the electromagnetic frequencies as sufficiently. And so that can be something that's a common link. So iodine in the right balance, either through chlorella or using some supplements, can be very supportive. And also that we notice a link quite often with the liver, if the liver's on overload, and that can be due to lots of different reasons. But one of the major ones is the use of hydrogenated fats. So maybe a history of not enough of the good fats, but poor fats in diet. And when the liver gets congested, again, there's no filtering that's happening, so the body's not processing. So the system gets jammed, really, not only with toxic overload, but energies can't move through. And so there's a sort of commonalities. When Steve also came to me for treatment, one of the things that had happened prior to him coming in to see me was he'd had some mercury fillings removed, but in a way that wasn't particularly safe. He'd had them drilled into, and he'd had mercury overload, and some of that was actually still in the brain. So what Steve was describing was actually drawing like a magnetic feeling in the brain. He was drawing the electro frequencies towards his brain because he had heavy metals there due to the mercury that had leached into the brain from the from the fillings. So that often is something that's to think about as well, because if we've got metal in the mouth, actually will draw frequencies towards us.
Absolutely.
More strongly, yeah.
So multifactorial, we're agreed. So if we just step back just very briefly, because everybody doesn't know what naturopathy is about.
Yeah.
Could you just very briefly address that? Because there's lots of different definitions. Barbara Wren I had like 2 years ago. I had a gentleman called David Getoff also, who's quite a well-known naturopath. And because in the UK, I think it's different to in the US. And in the US, you've got naturopathic doctors, and then you've got like traditional naturopaths like David Getoff. But I'm not really concerned about. For me, that's not really, because all we're really interested in is getting results. Yeah, we're not bothered with the qualifications you've got. So but so we can understand, what is naturopathy? What's your definition?
Yeah, it's an umbrella term really for nature cure. So whatever, different naturopaths actually have a variety of tools that fit into that sort of healing kit then, or toolkit. And our approach is very much based on plant medicine, so using a plant-based diet. We don't advocate animal products in our approach, but we do advocate, the hydration process, the alkalinity of the body, and a sort of plant-based diet. So it's an umbrella term really for whatever fits into that box to heal the system. And so our approach is very much based on using food as a medicine, moving with nature as well, working with seasonal eating, responding to seasonal eating through changes in diet, changing your supplements and also your herbal prescriptions with the seasons as well. So eating local foods, eating organic, tuning into actually what would be as natural for you in the environment that you're living in. As you know, is quite difficult these days because we're bombarded with, sort of lots of out of season food, and supermarkets, supply us all year round. And so what we do with our clients, we actually help people to come back to the basics. Yeah. So really coming back to, what grows around you, when it should grow around you, using sort of basic food that maybe, that is simple, really. Simple cooking methods, lots of raw food in the diet. We're big advocates of juicing. That really helps to remineralize the system. So our approach is really bringing things back to simplicity. And supplements are used, but we use them in a way that it fits into our 7-stage approach, where we've actually addressed the diet first. So we don't put supplements in straight away. We would actually address the diet, detoxify, then move supplements in if and when they're needed. And whenever we're using supplements, we're always using food-based supplements and powders and liquids over tablets or capsules. So, yeah, is that enough of a definition, Lloyd?
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, because Barbara Wren she's got some wonderful phrases, some wonderful terminology around this, and I was thinking something it was just coming into my mind, like, you know, dancing with the natural rhythms of nature or something like that, she would call it, which is wonderful. Isn't it wonderful?
Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, I love that. I love her approach.
Yeah,
which is your approach? Yeah, which you've pretty much adopted is very similar. And the difference is that you have this you both got this direct experience with EMFs, which she didn't have. So she had been helping people, and I spoke to her about 2 years ago. So she'd already helped, because I think she's stopped now her naturopathic college. I don't know if she's doing it still. Yeah, because she's a certain age now. But yeah, so the difference is obviously you've got this more intimate knowledge of this whole thing because you've lived it, and so that's what's interesting. But so I'd like to really dive into these 7 steps, this 7-stage approach a little bit more if we can. And so if we just so step number 1. Hydrate and introduce a water-rich diet, and everybody pretty much is agreed. We all, hydration is super important. Not everybody does it, okay, but everybody's pretty much agreed on this. How important it is, and possibly because I was talking to Frances Fox, and she was saying, this thing. Well, the other thing is that these EMFs are, exciting our molecules, and this is like creating a need for hydration, which we didn't have before. But whether that's true or not, that's beside the point. But so different experts are giving different advice on how to hydrate, because some of it's bottled mineral waters, others it's drinking water which has been treated through reverse osmosis or whatever. So my question is, what's your advice on the quality and the quantity of water?
Yeah, so the advice in terms of quantity for adults would be a minimum 4 pints, and spreading that water throughout the day, so that's equivalent to your 2 to 2.5 litres. The pH of the water is the most important. So if someone's drinking tap water, usually the pH is not sufficient for the body to stay well. Usually it's about a 6, whereas a pH of 7+ is what is required to stay well. And to get the fluid inside the cell, actually the body needs to be reasonably alkaline. So the water levels, if someone's not drinking any water, then some water's better than no water, even if it is tap water. But then the next stage would be, okay, how to change that pH balance. Could it be just adding